Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 232, that's a palindrome, of Super Switch Heads, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
And my name is Patrick Nisley.
Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very special guests that are going to be on the episode later. They're not here right now, but they will be for the main topic. We have the lovely people from Cyan. Are on the show. We've got Hannah Gamiel and Eric A. Anderson from Cyan, and they are known as the creators of Myst and the Riven franchise, along with Abduction and Firmament. Longtime listeners of the show will know I'm a huge fan of the Myst franchise and all things Cyan, so it was a huge delight to get to speak to them, and we'll have our interview with them up in just a little bit after the news portion. We'll be talking about that in the main topic. So I can't wait for you guys to listen to that. And then, of course, on top of that, we also have lots of news and rumors in the gaming landscape to go over, including Nintendo has some guidelines for tournaments and content creators that have a lot of people really pissed off. Splatfest happened. There's a new game added to NSO, some new patents from Nintendo, and other things in the gaming industry as well. We'll be getting into all that and more. But before we do, on today's episode, Patrick, just two of us right now. How are you doing? You have a good week?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good right in this moment. I feel good. You know, I've been reporting the last few weeks that I've been under the weather. I think I'm finally, knock on wood, not that I really believe in that, but
kick its ass.
that I'm feeling better. I'm feeling more like myself, which has been nice because I've been finally able to spend a little more time working on Monochrome Heights, the game that I'm making, and just having more energy is always better than feeling like you want to go to bed and slogging through the day. So we've been having some tough family stuff going on, but we'll get through it. You know, like I don't want to get too much into that, but so that's been a little bit of a downer, but overall doing all right. How about you, David?
I'm doing okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. No. It was a very Halloween weekend, yes. Right? I went to 3 parties overall this past weekend. It was like I went to one on Friday that was like a Halloween party / my friend's birthday party. Shout out to Baylor. Now you're probably listening. Baylor always listens to the show. Much appreciated. So I went to his party. That was a fucking blast. And then, party hopped on Saturday between 2 parties. I don't know, it's weird, like, doing Halloween parties with the sober thing. It's definitely a different experience.
Parties
I was just like begging. I was just like begging for somebody to talk to me about Israel-Palestine. Right. I was like, I need to have like a real conversation because you guys are like really drunk and I'm not on your level. But that was pretty fun. I got to wear my peach costume out. I did not modify it. I did it straight up and enjoyed that quite a bit. Did you do any Halloween things or
no?
I mean, Halloween is tomorrow. We're recording this on Monday. So
I will be going with my kid who is going to be dressing up as a red Pikmin.
Okay, cool.
Out for Halloween. Our neighbors had like a they're Mexican. They had a Loteria party where they all dressed up as Loteria characters and last minute kind of invited us. So it was actually a lot of fun. I've never actually played Loteria before. I mean, it's bingo basically, but they all had really cool costumes dressed up like all the Loteria cards. So that was cool.
That's great.
So that was the most Halloween-y thing I've done, which it was not like, it was during the day and stuff. But
that sounds fun to me.
Yeah, that's it so far. But I'll report back next week if Halloween has any noteworthy. My neighborhood does this weird thing. It's not weird, but it's cool. Where not only is it trick-or-treating for kids, but there's a lot of grown-up places where they give you drinks. Like a lot of people, like a percentage of the houses you go to give out candy to your kid and then are like, here's a little airplane sized Tito's or here's a Jello shot or here's a glass of wine.
Yeah, my friend's doing that this year too. They showed like the two bowls next to each other of the liquor and the candy.
Yeah, and then it's always like wild stuff like that. Here's some sangria, here's a shot. And so like you gotta be careful because it's a Tuesday night and like I'm with my kid and
you don't have
doing Jello shots out here.
You don't have to drink them there in person.
Sometimes
save
I
them
feel
for
like I
later.
have to, or else I'm walking around in the neighborhood with like a bunch of open cans. That doesn't feel right either. So
You just walk home at the end of the night with someone else's kid. You're like, wait, where'd mine go?
Yeah,
That's funny, man.
anyway, that was a good check-in. We should move. We should move on.
We should only ever do shows with the two of us going forward.
Well, last week we did an episode about Mario Wonder, the Super Mario Bros. Wonder, the new game. Man, that was a fun episode, and we had a lot of great conversation about it on our Discord. I mean, there's a lot of people we could shout out. You know, Steve Irwin, Cool Uncle Vince, AV, the Huge, KSBO, KC. Typos, Cena. I think in particular, I was thinking of like, and Kara said it. Cena had a nice, comment about like, will this game hold up? And I think KSBOKC had a nice, long, thought out sort of big takeaways post. So I definitely wanted to mention their conversations, without getting too much into it. And AV did too. So
I thought it was pretty disrespectful of Cena to just shit on the game in front of everyone. No, I'm just kidding. It was very measured and thoughtful response. Yeah,
I think it's about, one of the questions I think is, will the Wonder gimmick hold up either over time or in a sequel? And I think that's a fair question to ask. Over on our YouTube page, we got a comment, another one from Scary Fingers 101, who said, seeing the King Boo screenshot prior to release got their hopes up for unique bosses in Wonder. And the game is still near perfect, but Bowser Jr. for every castle has been one of their few gripes.
Not even every some just don't even have castles.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major. You pointed it out last week, but I think you were a little further than maybe people are getting to that point now and seeing.
Yeah, I think like airships don't have bosses. Bosses in general are definitely the weak point. Yeah.
If you too want to be shouted out next week, if you know anything in the news or in our conversation with the developers from Cyan, if you have any comments on that, definitely post them on YouTube or in the Discord or any social media platform. Send us a message and we'll try to shout you out. And, tell a friend about the podcast to help us grow. Post a Reddit comment, share us somewhere. And also hop over to YouTube if you're not watching the video version and do that and hit like and subscribe. All right, we're going to talk about the news. We're going to start off with one that might be one of our bigger ones to talk about. Nintendo has put out some updated or new guidelines. And the word guidelines is interesting, which I want to break down in a little bit. For both content creators and for like esports tournaments involving their games, notably Smash and Splatoon. And there's a lot of understandable people who are upset about this because some of this feels a little, I don't know, paternalistic, draconian. Yeah. Also, some of it just feels wrong. Like just it feels like a step backwards.
That's a great way to put it, because I think we've been really applauding Nintendo a lot recently on a bit of what seems to be like a sea change within the company on kind of moving away from some of the safe Iwata-isms of not that Iwata was a bad president of Nintendo, but he was, a lot of his era was kind of known for the kind of like, we're going to take off PictoChat and we're not going to let people send messages anymore and everything. And this definitely feels like they're being more protective of their stuff again, right? In ways that just don't really sit right. Yeah,
overly protective. I think one of the reasons I wanted to mention that I haven't sat with this for very long is because I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to just be all outrage or all defending Nintendo on this, which I think I've seen people do both. And I think maybe some of this isn't ridiculously unreasonable, but some of it just feels or is understandable at the very least, right? Given what's happened in the Smash competitive community, I could, but on the other hand, a lot of it just feels dumb. It doesn't feel helpful. Like it doesn't, I think it's bad. I mean, I think Arlo put up a video that was, a bit reactionary, but it was, he was pretty much like, Nintendo just doesn't want you to do tournaments. And it's kind of hard to look at this any other way. It's like a lot of the stuff in here is really, really
bizarre and really heavy-handed. Like they don't want any tournament to have more than 200 participants.
Well, I think you can have a large amount of participants and all that, right? But you have you have to get
a license.
You have to get a license.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm still absorbing this, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like, they just want to do their own tournaments. I mean, I think we saw this with, Nintendo Live. They hosted their own tournaments there.
Mhm.
I think that they like the competitive scene, but I think that they want to own it and have moreover, think they want to have control over it, right? And I think let's get back into just some of these community tournament like guidelines.
Yeah, so this is for non-big things that you aren't paying for a license for, right?
Right, exactly. So if you want to have like a local or something, you can't have more than 200 participants for in-person tournaments or up to 300 participants for online. There's really big restrictions on entry fees, like how much money you can actually charge in order to get in, how much the prize pool can be. You can't serve food or drinks at your tournament, which is crazy. You can't like require subscriptions in order to join. To go through everything would take a really long time. And there are lots of YouTube videos that have broken it down. I think Good Vibes Gaming did a really good video, just kind of like breaking down all the individual rules and why they're really stupid, but it's like, but what this proves is that Panda was trying to put on stuff for a while, like doing their own tournaments, and those got shut down. A lot of the big Smash tournaments that are, there's tons of Smash tournaments that have way more than 300 people that are not going to get licenses from Nintendo, that are kind of dead in the water now.
Well, yeah, and the ones that are smaller that wouldn't have been able to, or, I don't know how hard it is to get a license, but I imagine it's not a simple thing to do, are now going to be stuck being unable to do this because they're in a venue that has food or something, or they're in a venue that to put it on, they usually give out a small prize and now they can't, or whatever.
Yeah. I just think it's silly for Nintendo to be like, oh, if this is indeed what they're going for, I think it's silly for them to be like, oh, well, we want to profit off of these things, because nobody's profiting off of doing like Smash tournaments. It's like people like spend a bunch of money to get there in the hopes that they make enough money to pay for their ticket out. You know what I mean? Like that's so often like what all the prize pool is of these things. So I don't really understand. I don't know.
I don't know why, but to me, you and me putting on an event where we play a video game feels very different than you and me putting on an event where we like screen a movie. You know what I'm saying? And because I feel like, I've seen some of the arguments being made that like, well, if you're hosting a convention that's like a film convention or something, you can't screen Iron Man without,
Yeah.
And that's like, that's a fair point. And I think that's what Nintendo's kind of treating this like, but for some reason it just feels different to me. I mean? Like
there's like an unspoken rule of the internet that like video games don't follow along with every other piece of media in that way. Like for instance, like whenever we show video game footage in the YouTube version of our podcast, it never gets copyright flags. But if we ever show a trailer for a movie that's going to be on Netflix, it immediately gets copyright struck, right? Like, and it's the same with licensed music, right? It's like, it just, the same rules like have never really applied, even though there's nothing like hard in place that makes that a law. It's just always ridden that line.
There's one like element of it that makes it feel that way. And that's the gameplay, that I am moving this character, right? And that my playing of Smash against somebody in this one instance is never going to happen again, right? Like this exact same like moves and interactions, like and that's why it feels a little bit different. But it just doesn't feel like they should be involved at all in any of this stuff. And we haven't even touched on the content creation stuff really too much.
Yeah. We'll get to that in just a second. But I think like for me, this feels like it can't be uncoupled from a lot of the controversy that was going on within the Super Smash Brothers community within the past few years. You know, I think that there were a lot of stories coming out of the Smash tournaments where people are drinking and they're giving drinks to underage people, and that
sexual abuse,
sexual abuse of minors and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, like this awful stuff that was, you know, there's kind of a Me Too movement within the Smash community from this stuff. And, you know, Nintendo sees that and they're like, fuck, you know, like now the name of our intellectual property is like tied to this like awful movement. And so it's like, I just feel like this is Nintendo trying to be like, look, if you guys are going to be doing these things, we got to do them by our rules.
Right. I never walk past a bar that's got a Smash tournament running and think, oh, that's officially sanctioned, or you know what I mean? Like that's like, and I think that's where some of this trips me up too, which is like, it kind of feels like they're worried that somebody is gonna, you know, think that they've condoned these terrible, or you know what I mean? Like, that like somebody, oh, if there's a tournament, then there must be, no, that's just not how, like people who make, I don't know, Monopoly, is Hasbro in charge, or like Magic the Gathering, are they responsible for what happens at a meetup? You know what I mean? Like, that's not.
I totally hear what you're saying, and it's I if
agree. That's part of it, it's just dumb.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that the other kind of theory on why they're doing this is just, and why they have such like specific rules, like they're never planning on really enforcing any of these. They just want an excuse to be able to shut anything down that they want. You know what I mean? They just want to be like, oh, if this thing is fucked up, we just want to be able to be like, oh, we're taking it off because you broke this rule. You know what I mean? It just gives them a reason to have total control over something, right? Yeah, and so it's like, it's probably, I mean, in most likelihoods, they're not going to even hear about your fucking tournament.
Right, that's what I was about to say. Let's say you go to a high school and your high school has a Smash club and you have a tournament on a school campus. Technically, you probably can't do that. Or, you know, maybe you can, because
especially if you have a bunch of like vodka there.
Well, yeah, or whatever. But like, again, like you said, they're never going to know, and most tournaments can probably proceed as they are, but it doesn't bode well, because then, you know, any venue that is worried about it might see this and be like, well, no, you can't do that, you know?
Well, we'll definitely see like kind of what this turns into. I mean, obviously the Smash community is they're the ones that are making the most fuss about this, right?
Yeah,
now,
and then I've also heard a lot of Splatoon people be upset because that's not quite at the same level, and then you know, people who are like, I've been trying to push it to be at that level, and it's how are we going to do that?
Well, but we should talk about these content guidelines for content creators. You know, that there's basically another thing that they pushed out was rules on what you can and can't put into content. And I imagine these are going to crack down a little bit harder on. But some of it is a little worrying. You know, I think that they really don't want you to show anything using their content that feature graphic, explicit, harmful, otherwise offensive content. That kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
But they also really don't want to have any sort of illegally modified software shown, which I think is a pretty obnoxious thing. Like, you know, lots of people make mods of games, but they really do not want any content made with this, which makes it really hard to distribute these kinds of modified content. And then also they don't want to have any sort of data mine content shown. And I think that at any point they can, you know, pull copyright claims on any of this stuff, right?
And they also have a note in here about they don't want you to just play the game without, like, it says, technically the bullet point says, we encourage you to create videos that include your creative input and commentary. Videos and images that contain mere copies of Nintendo game content without creative input or commentary are not permitted. So like, think about like a long play, you know, a no commentary long play, which is like a common thing on YouTube that people enjoy, so that they can maybe not have somebody talking over the, you know what I mean? And I pull videos from those a lot for this because I don't want somebody's head in the corner or whatever. Right. Like, I think that's a bummer, because like, it just, it's like you said. Yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent, I get it.
Right.
You know, it's like the same with fair use. You know, you can't just like rip somebody's YouTube video and put it up, you know, willy nilly. But if you talk about it and you're critical of it and you add your own thing to it, then that's fair use, right?
Yeah.
So I get that to a certain degree, but I think, I don't know, I'm worried about the modified content stuff, and I think that this kind of is setting a bad precedent. All of this kind of thing, like, again, this is stuff that hasn't really been kicked into effect yet. They did double down on do not upload soundtracks or music from our games, which is like, dude, just fucking put your stuff on Spotify then, man. Like, where else am I supposed to listen to? Am I supposed to buy the game, load it up on my computer with a illegally copied version, and then rip the sound files myself? Like, that's ridiculous.
Or like, if older titles too, right? Like, I mean, going back to the tournaments thing, like Melee or something, like I might, or like just on this content stuff, like if I want to see somebody play an old game without commentary or see mods to old games, it's just weird.
Yeah, it
just feels paternalistic and like backwards compared to everybody else and compared to the current era we're living in, and we'll see how it pans out, I guess, but it's just a bummer.
Yeah.
We'll move on. I'm sure we'll talk about this more as it develops, and maybe who knows what else to say about it. But briefly, we'll get into some fun stuff here. Splatoon Splatfest happened. Splatoon 3 Halloween Splatoween happened, which was zombie versus skeleton versus ghost. And the results were that Ghost wins.
You'll remember that Ghost was the official pick of Switchheads. I feel like this is a rare dub for Switchheads. We usually do not win based on the group that we pick, but it was really nice to get a win for it. It was hard fought. The points were actually pretty close, but this was fun. I didn't play too much of the Splatfest, but I wish I'd played more because they went harder on this Halloween theme than they do for most of the Splatfest, it seemed.
The like audio, there's a lot of and visuals. There was a lot of little details. That's true.
The whole Splatsville was totally done up in Halloween regalia and stuff. So it was a pretty cool Splatfest. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, agreed. I might talk about it more at the end, so I'll say that.
Sure.
We talked about this last week that there was an Xbox partner preview that happened, and I wasn't sure about how this would be, and I didn't actually watch it, but I read the recaps, and it seems like there was a decent amount of interesting stuff actually shown off at this event. Again, it's Xbox, so I don't know how much of this is relevant to everybody here, but I don't know, David. I mean, Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear Solid 3 remake looks really, really good. Yeah, I'm excited for that. I think one of the games I was most excited for was Dungeons of Hinterberg. That game looks really interesting and very fun. I think that's coming to Switch also. Don't take my word for that, but yeah, it was cool to see them do this. It felt on par with a lot of the Switch partner showcases.
Yeah, actually decent amount of stuff in that one. We won't cover it in detail, but while we're talking about Xbox, I wanted to make sure we talked about this, which is another thing that I just kind of found out about. I actually think this one did just kind of come up recently, and that's that Xbox is making it so that you can't use unofficial accessories like controllers and like that sort of thing with your Xbox console starting again around the same time as Nintendo's new rules go in effect in mid-November. And right now you get like a little warning that's people have noticed that's starting to pop up, which again feels like another sort of controlling problematic thing.
Yeah, these stories kind of feel related, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, it's another thing where it's like I kind of get it, right? Like, but at the same time, like, what sucks about doing it now instead of like at the beginning of a console generation or something like that is that like people might have invested in, I don't know, a custom fight stick or something that might have cost them a lot of money to play Street Fighter on their Xbox or something, right? That is now just not going to work. Or like a racing rig or something that's not official, but they got to work. I don't know. I just feel like there's potential for that kind of stuff that sucks.
I agree. I don't have much to add to this. Other than it's bad. And I think, if you are going to do something like this, doing it in the middle of the life cycle of a system is pretty brutal. If you're going to do this, wait until like a new console generation, right? Like this is just, but either way, you should just have an open API and you can make controllers that fit that. It's silly.
Yeah, maybe this is true on PlayStation and Switch too. I don't know. Maybe all the third-party stuff is licensed because it has to be. I know like Hori and Power A and all that is, but like I don't know if you could like make
That's
your
a good
own
question.
custom Joy-Cons or PS5 controller or whatever.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah,
if you know the answer to that, please let us know in the comments.
Yeah, I'd love to know if this is different than the other two big ones or not, but I don't know that yet. So maybe next week. But moving on and more bad news. Bungie has had some layoffs. I mean, this has been happening across the industry, but we talked about live service games recently, and Destiny 2 is one of the big ones that Bungie makes. They've had to lay off some people. I don't know if this is related to Bungie or related to Sony or, like where the bloat is or where the decisions lie. Do you know much about the specifics of this? It's not something I have dug into.
I don't really know. I mean, this just happened today, the day we're recording. So I think a lot of people are still understanding what happened. I mean, I know they just had an all hands meeting and it was like, hey, here's what's going on. Right. And this all kind of just gobsmacked a lot of people at Bungie. It's just kind of been an awful, awful, awful year for the games industry as far as layoffs are concerned.
Yeah.
I think actually I was on Twitter. I saw Hannah, who's going to be on the show in just a little bit, made a tweet about how everybody's saying this is like one of the best years ever for gaming, and then just listed all the companies that have had massive layoffs. And I think that the number of layoffs that have been happening and the unprecedented number of mergers, acquisitions, consolidation within the games industry are not unrelated. I think that that's not a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
That all of this is kind of coalescing. A lot of people were, myself included, just excited to finally see the Activision deal be done. But it's like, Sony bought Bungie and then for $1 billion, right? And still they're having to do layoffs, right? So that makes you really worry, I think, for a lot of the, Activision Blizzard King employees that now have a new home at Microsoft.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess we'll move on to something lighter.
Yeah, sorry to make it I didn't mean to leave that story on a cliffhanger.
No, it's more just like I was looking at maybe we should have reordered this because it's like
a
Mario Party 3 is on NSO now. The N64 game is available to play, I think as of now or so
it's up.
I think what I'm more interested in talking about, because I don't think I've ever played Mario Party 3, is just like where are we at with the N64 app and their cadence of games? Yeah, is it 1080 and that's it?
1080 snowboarding is the only one they've put out, or that they have yet to put out. It's weird, I mean, I think a lot of people assumed that all these games would come out within like a 6-month period. They really stretched it out over a whole fucking year, and they only released the games that they said in that graphic, right? So
yeah, they gave us like one wild card. I feel like, didn't they? It was GoldenEye, but that was.
Oh yeah, I guess GoldenEye was the wild card. Yeah,
which
maybe Banjo-Kazooie. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe Banjo-Kazooie. I don't remember, to be honest with you, but it doesn't. But yeah, it hasn't been a lot of surprises either way.
Yeah, hopefully we get another list that we could look forward to playing over the course of another fucking year. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. But while we're moving on to some rumors about some other old games that may or may not come back. Every once in a while we talk about Sirkin Toto, who usually
Dr. Sirkin.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Dr. Toto, who's a analyst and, their name comes up sometimes around the end of the year when there's like talk about what's going to happen and that kind of stuff. But I guess apparently they have made some sort of tweet suggesting there might be some sort of Legend of Zelda remake. I haven't actually seen the tweet. I've just heard the rumor. So let's just for a moment indulge this, David. What do you think a Legend of Zelda remake could be? I know you had a theory here.
Oh, I think it's time to remake Breath of the Wild.
Well, we've also heard that might be true.
No, ground up remake.
Oh, a whole remake
in Unreal Engine 5. No, I think I don't know. I don't have like a ton of dogs in this race. I mean, I think I'd love to see, I've talked about a Four Swords style game for a long time. I'd love to see that come back. I think a lot of people want to see, obviously, the still as of yet unreleased Wind Waker and Twilight Princess games. Maybe an Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask sort of remake, something like that. I know something that Jordan's been talking about a lot is getting another remake of the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons games in the style of Link's Awakening. There's also been a big rumor from Capcom that I think by March there should be a huge new Capcom game out as well. So maybe these are related. I don't know that Capcom still has any rights to Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, but I think it'd be cool if those two rumors were connected.
Yeah, that would be cool. Of course, the one everybody talks about is like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, but I don't know. It would be a lot cooler if it was something different.
Really, I mean, out of everything we've just said, I think none of those games really need to be remade.
Yeah.
I think what we've touched before on Zelda 2.
Yeah, one or two. Yeah, that would be cool.
I think that would be pretty fucking awesome if they remade either of those.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to a patent news, which is notoriously misleading, but we're going to talk about it anyway. There's been a discovery that Nintendo has filed a patent for a sort of detachable second screen for like a handheld looking thing, which obviously people are taking and wondering if this is something to do with a new Switch. I guess it should be noted that these were filed sometime about a year ago almost, but they've just been kind of made public. And so I was reading about this somewhere and I saw some comment where somebody was like, anything that we see is probably not something they're doing. And I don't know how patents work, if that's true or not, but it definitely feels that way. So I don't know that this means anything, but I suppose if you're going to have a second screen, having a way to take it off so it's not required for every game or something is an interesting concept. Like if we just look at this as a concept by itself, what do you think? Is it weird to have a detachable second screen?
Yeah, I think it's stupid.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
think
weird.
we should do this. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it looks basically like a 3DS that you can, when you close it, it's got a third screen on like the outside of the clamshell. And then you can also remove it to take it off and have it be two pieces. I don't know. It's dumb. Nintendo, just don't do stuff like this. You don't have to do stuff like this anymore. Like this is not necessary, right? I think they come up with crazy ideas all the time, and then they patent them because they're like, hey, if we ever do something like that, that'd be kind of cool if we could fucking own that forever, which is so stupid. Well, we should do a whole episode on IP law and copyright. But it's interesting to look at this kind of stuff, and I think it's more than anything, I like to see it because it's like a little bit of a peek behind the curtain at some of the creative minds.
Yeah, the R&D.
Nintendo R&D. Like yeah. But do I think this is going to be the Switch 2? No. I think Switch 2 is going to be a VR headset, as we've talked about a lot. And it's called the Super Switch, excuse me.
Right. It's hard not to say Switch 2, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's interesting to see this kind of stuff.
Well, we'll close out our news then with some Super Mario Wonder discussion. Just the game hasn't been out for very long, and we don't have lots of info about the sales yet from Nintendo, but the few places that report this sort of stuff, we do know a little bit. And one thing is that Nintendo of Europe put out a tweet saying that in its first 3 days, Super Mario Bros. Wonder became the fastest selling Super Mario game ever in Europe. We don't know, how many copies and that sort of thing, but we do know that it very quickly sold a lot to make it the fastest selling game there. And then Famitsu puts out the Japanese charts weekly. And so we do know that it is also had a very strong, probably the highest opening in Japan, right? I think you said, David, in the notes, at over 600,000 sales in just the first week over in Japan, which is obviously a smaller place. So
right. I think I think that New Super Mario Brothers outsold it along with some Wii Mario games, but those were all physical. There was no digital sales then at all, right? So you have to think that if you're looking at what's realistically a 50-50 split, or maybe even more, to be honest these days, it's kind of hard to really tell exactly where the sales data is trending, especially in Japan, which has a lot more of a hold on the physical market. Yeah, this is a very, very big opening in Japan. I'm can't wait to see the numbers for worldwide on this and see if it's been able to outdo the new Super Mario Brothers U game.
And then we have some notes here about speedrunning, which I know is sort of something you've been following, David. Do you want to share with us what's happened in the speedrunning community?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's always really fun to be in the early days of a speedrunning game. Especially a really big game, like when there's a new 2D Mario, like one of the most famous speed games of all time is the original Mario Brothers. People are really, really rabid in the speedrunning community for the Mario franchise. So being here at the launch of one and following the kind of speedrun times is really fascinating. I think at first we were looking at about where people could land finally on a speed run being around like 2 hours 10, 2 hours 15 but definitely over 2 hours. But only recently speedrunners have been able to finally find an exploit in the game that allows players to skip the boss on World 1 and a few levels on World 1 and then skip the entirety of Worlds 2 and 3. In Super Mario Brothers Wonder, which right now I think the world record is somewhere around 140, like an hour 40, something like that. Which to me is great news. I think an over 2 hour any percent speed run is kind of a lot to ask of a lot of people. Most other Mario games, you can do any percent in like 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And it makes for really easy, digestible viewing of an any percent speed run. So people are split on whether or not this is a good thing for the community or for the speedrun in general. But this is why you have categories in speedruns. And I'm personally of the opinion that this exploit should be allowed in the any percent, just because still you're looking at like an hour 40 minute, hour 30 minute, maybe we might see sub hour 30 with this exploit, and I'm sure we'll find more in the future. But if you're curious, it's the way that it works is basically you use two controllers and you go into 2-player mode, and then you can kind of clip through certain areas on the overworld by teleporting back and forth with the two characters, which then allows you to skip into the pedal aisles and then lets you skip whole worlds that way. So it's a pretty fascinating speedrun tactic. And I think, I hope Nintendo doesn't patch it out because there's no like warp pipes in this game,
right.
And there's no way to actually skip the game properly. So I think having stuff like this is kind of a fan-made version of that sort of thing that they've been doing forever.
Awesome. Well, then that's going to do it for the news. And we are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking with a couple of developers over at Cyan all about Myst and Riven and their other games and Myst likes in general after this break. All right, we are back, and it's not just David and I anymore. We've got some special guests with us. This week, we're doing an interview with some folks from Cyan. We're really excited to have you. Why don't we just start off with some introductions and maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves? Who wants to go
Sure.
first?
Who you want to go first?
You, Eric. Since
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I opened my mouth first. I'm Eric. I'm the creative director at Cyan. I've been there for a long time, many, many years, and kind of started as an artist and now do a lot more than that. Yeah. Hannah, go.
Great intro. My name's Hannah Gamiel. I'm the development director at Cyan, and I have not been there as long as Eric has. He will always beat everyone on that. And but I've been there for about 10 to 12 years, and I help run the company with Eric and Rand Antonio. So that's
awesome.
my intro.
You guys nailed it.
That's great. Well, that makes me wonder then, Eric, how you said a long time. And Hannah,
it's been sort of, stop and start because I've worked on several projects and at a couple other companies here and there, but I started in 2000. So, but it's not all at once. It's come and gone, and I think I hold the record for a number of people who have left and come back.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we got a few of those at my job too.
I've done that in my day job a few times as well.
We love to see it. Well, yeah, thanks so much for joining, guys. And we'll get into a lot of the kind of topics of discussion here in just a sec. But before we get into that, I mean, you guys are kind of running the ship over at Cyan now. Is that correct?
That is correct. Although Rand and Tony are still around, they just try not to do as much as they used to.
They're testing out retirement, seeing how it feels.
Yeah.
How does it? What's the vibe? Is that?
I imagine it's pretty good.
I would imagine.
Yeah, that's funny.
But it's working for y'all, I guess it sounds like.
Yeah.
But
it's so great to have you guys on. We met earlier this year at Mysterium. We got to do a little tour of the Cyan headquarters, which is amazing for me. I mean, I've been a huge fan of Myst pretty much since I was like a very small child. I think one of my very first gaming memories is playing Myst with my dad. And so actually getting to go to Cyan and meet you guys and meet Rand and just also be around a bunch of people that are really into the same thing was kind of insane. Nobody ever wants to talk to me about Myst in like my friend circles. So being around a bunch of people that were actually really into it was really awesome. So I appreciate you guys coming on.
Well, yeah, maybe what is Mysterium, David or Hannah and Eric? Because I mean, I know a little bit, but maybe our average listener doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, Mysterium is an annual fan gathering hosted by the fans most years. And occasionally, it is located in Spokane at our headquarters, technically Meade, Washington, but that's just north of Spokane.
Gotcha.
And this past summer, we had one of those special years where Mysterium was located on site in Spokane. The fans held some events for a couple of days at a nearby hotel, and then on one of the Saturdays, everybody showed up to HQ and got a special presentation or two. And yes, David was there. It was a great day. It was honestly like a blast. So
it was also this year. I'm glad. Was this your first Mysterium, David?
Yeah, it's the first one I've ever been to.
This was by far the one that felt like the most I don't want to say professional because that makes it sound like, but it's like a fan organized gathering.
Right.
This year felt different. This year felt like a legit convention, and the vibe was amazing. And I don't just mean the Cyan component. I mean like going to their hotel and seeing the way that it was handled on site there with the stuff that had nothing to do with Cyan. Just felt professional. It felt really good this year.
It's a celebration of all things Cyan too. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with Myst. People came with Firmament garb and questions about Firmament and abduction, and if we're gonna make abduction 2 and
I'm also
other fun questions like that. So something that actually really surprised me is that I had an assumption that many of the fans who attended and would still attend were fans of our massively online multiplayer game called Myst Online, Uru Live. I think now
it's got like 4 names.
Yeah, it's got a lot of names.
It's like Myst Online, Uru Live again because we had to reboot the servers or something. It was like a whole thing. But I asked the audience, I think during Eric and my's talk, asking them who all's here because of Myst Online, and there were way fewer people raising their hand than I expected. Many of the people who attended, it was their first time ever attending, and they were fans of newer games or fans of the newest Myst. They hadn't even played the original Myst. It was pretty wild to me. It was really cool to see all these new fans coming in. It was great.
It really blew us away because traditionally, like it's a huge contingent of Uru people. It's the people who played Uru who got together every year in real life to hang out like in person. And but the fact that there's first timers coming, like I guess this was a record breaking year in terms of first time attendees. That's pretty cool from coming from a couple people trying to grow the studio and build, a bigger fan base. That's nice to see.
It's a good sign.
Yeah. It was definitely cool. I mean, like I've been a lurker, You know, like I've been like watching the Twitch streams for like a few years and because I didn't even know it was a thing for a while, right? And then whenever I found out it was a thing and they were streaming on Twitch, I was like, oh, hell yeah. And then when you find out it's actually in Spokane at the headquarters, it's going to have like some bit of cooperation with you guys, like inputting some of the events on. Like that's what really got me interested in actually biting the bullet and going myself, right? And I think another thing I loved about it so much was like, and I'm sure we'll get to actual Cyan here in a second, but like another thing I loved about it was like the breadth of different kinds of people that are there. I think it's like,
Oh yeah.
out of all the fan conventions, that's got to be like the most. Like there were people like in their teen years, like all the way up to people in like their 70s. And it was like, it was just like a huge hodgepodge of different kinds of people. And it's like a very wide net that Myst
definitely
fans.
cross-generational for sure.
Yeah. I was getting lessons in the Denis language from, I forget his name, but he was up there in age. And I trusted him because he seemed very wise.
Oh, was it Rawa? Was it Richard?
No, not Rawa. This was at the hotel, but
gotcha.
Yeah. But I was wondering just about Mysterium. Like, how much are you guys involved? Like, even in the years, because I mean, you guys do panels and stuff every year. Like, how into the actual organization of the event do you guys get at Cyan?
In previous years, we were pretty minimally involved. The fans handled most of it, except we would handle the on-site event at Cyan. Typically, we would be in charge of what's presented. This year, I think our team had more, I know that our team had more involvement in what the events were going to look like, not necessarily at the hotel,
Right.
but I think we had a better handle on what would happen between presentations at Cyan and how various communications would be sent. But the fans did, as always, it was a major push for them and they handled like a lot of it. So on our end, our marketing and brand manager, Jeff Lanstott, handled the brunt of the organization there. And I think because of him and working with the fans, like we can credit them all with making this the best Mysterium ever. Eric and I just showed up.
Yep.
Same with Brandon Richard. We kind of just showed up and did our presentation. And the rest is up to everybody else's credit.
That's good. You don't have to like stop development for like a month every year, like leading up to this event or something like that.
No, in fact, I don't think we've talked about this yet, but it was the day before Mysterium. We were like, we should show a little sneak peek about Riven.
Hell yeah.
And the team was like, okay. And we made Boiler Island happen.
That's
literally
great.
like
you make it sound like we built it in a day.
I mean, to be fair,
why isn't it out yet? That was so fast.
It was already built. We just decided to show it, tune it a little bit for the presentation. I think at that point it was just hiding the cursor. That's pretty much it. But.
Like previous years, they had reached out to us and been like, "Hey, can you guys do a panel or 2 or 3?" And we would have to, I'd go around. Like I think the last year or the year before, I got a bunch of the Uru like devs together and we did like a retrospective of, what it was like back in the day to work on Uru and stuff. This year, like we didn't have to do anything. It was just, other than obviously the talk that Hannah and I did and
sure.
Rand and Richard did a talk as well. That's kind of nice. Just having them show up, and as long as we have cool stuff to show. And boy, did the fans react to the stuff we showed. It was, I think Hannah and I were dumbfounded at how that went over. So
yeah. That's great. Well, congratulations. I'm glad glad it's in the rear view a little bit. You guys can just focus on other stuff at the moment.
Yeah.
But
I should say Eric and I, like it was Eric and I who decided to show the Riven stuff. This wasn't the fan. I mean, the fans will always demand that we show stuff. The marketing department will always demand we showed stuff, but it literally was like just a wild hair. Eric and I decided to do that.
Yeah, we had to twist a couple arms too. There were, I won't name names, but one might rhyme with
Schmanderwin.
But no, it was like, don't worry, the fans are gonna dig what we're doing, and getting the reaction that we did was the best possible confirmation we could have gotten. And
Yeah.
I think it made the whole company feel like, oh, okay, we're sitting on something pretty cool here. It was a nice shot in the arm.
I know we want to move on from Mysterium, but I want to ask one more question.
Sure.
And that is, Hannah, you kind of hinted at this, but like you were kind of surprised by the demographics of who plays which games. Is there anything else that y'all are able to take away from these gatherings? Does it ever give you valuable feedback, or is that not part of it so much?
Oh, I mean, we're always looking for feedback,
Sure.
really. What's nice about these events, though, is it allows our team to kind of pull our heads out from under the sand and remind ourselves this is who we make games for, and this is, there's enjoyment and laughter and so many other emotions that come from people who play our games. Sometimes it's hard to lose sight, or it's easy to lose sight of that, is what I'm trying to say, when you're in the midst of everything with development. So it's really a positivity boost for us every single time. It's obviously a positivity boost for the fans too, to get this sort of insight. And it's just an all-around feel-good reminder
I think it
we
does.
make games in service of people who have real feelings and life experiences, and some of these people's lives are so entangled in what Myst means to them that it's like really special. So it's nice to be reminded of that, I guess. That's like a very like heart squishy thing to say. But
no,
it's
it
true.
does us as much good as it does the fans. And that's like we have a lot of first time devs who they've been with us for a few years, but it's the first Mysterium they had been to. And we were saying ahead of time, like, oh, just you wait. And they were blown away by the fan reaction and getting to meet the fans and having people come up to them and wanting to engage with them simply because they're just a team member at Cyan, and that means everything. And it's so it was a boost for them. And then to answer your question about what do we get out of it, like when Hannah and I did our presentation, we talked a little bit about kind of our desires for future projects. And a big part of that was asking the crowd, how do you feel about that? And that wasn't a put on, that wasn't a show. That was us actually going like, this is kind of what we're thinking. Would that feel good? Would that be a good direction? And we listened to the feedback, and it's informing sort of what we're working on now and into the future.
Nice.
And what a privilege that is to like be able to do that to a room full of fucking people. It's like, usually it's like you put out a poll on Twitter or something and maybe you get some feedback, or it's hard to gauge stuff like that. But when you've actually got people who are the target demo, people who like are more likely to play your games than others, like getting that feedback in person, it's just, I don't know, when do you ever get that opportunity, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe we can dive a little bit more into like the kind of like Cyan as a company, like kind of throughout the years, because it's, Cyan started indie, right? Like back in the 90s with the creation of Myst, and then, Myst was a huge mega hit in the 90s, and it kind of like blew up, and I guess was always indie. Is that right? Or was it ever like...
It depends on what your definition of indie is, because there are some games that come out nowadays that are backed by multi-million-dollar corporations, and those companies are still called indie. So it depends. Myst and Riven certainly had help from a publisher, so technically speaking, to get everything out physically, because you needed one at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Ubisoft, of course, was a part of Myst Online, and we saw how that went. For context for the listeners, it did not survive at Ubisoft, so that's why we
it didn't even survive till launch. They pulled the plug before it even went live. So
well, and even with like Myst 3, I actually just I've been replaying some of the games since Mysterium, because I've been just kind of like back on my bullshit again. But it's like, but it's like even with like Myst 3, it's like that game, wasn't developed by Cyan, but that was like Presto with Ubisoft's publishing, right? And even then, it's like it did well enough at the time, but it wasn't like marketed correctly. It wasn't like I even remember at the time, like Myst and Riven were such huge hits, and then that came out, and it was kind of like, where's the momentum? It just didn't feel like Ubisoft really understood the franchise as much as they needed to. But we're not here just to shit on Ubisoft right now.
Yeah, no, I can't really. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, let me think. What year was that? I was probably 10 years old, so I was not really aware of how they marketed Myst 3 at that time. But with that said, to answer your question about being indie, I think right now we would probably consider ourselves a pretty average indie. Maybe not so average, but the ones that you hear about, I guess, more. Yeah. Which is that we have enough funding to support ourselves. We might get funding, like grant funding from some place to offset costs. By no means is anyone out there paying in full for all of our projects. Like some people are, I'm lucky. I feel great for people who have that, but that's not us.
Sure.
Turns out, paying in full for like a puzzle adventure game is hard.
Well, yeah.
To get.
That's kind of why I wanted to bring it up, because it's like, I feel like, there was obviously, like, for a while, like Cyan was a household name, right? And then it's like, and then over the years, like that style of game almost became a little bit more niche, like over the years, and gaming evolved and trends evolved and everything like that. Now you guys find yourself in this space, like, especially with, with Abduction and Firmament, which are awesome games. So I'd love to hear some dev stories on those soon. But like, with the Myst remake and now with the upcoming Riven remake, it's like coming back to these franchises in a different kind of style of Cyan, or at least a different like landscape. Like, what kind of like challenges does that pose, if any? And then also like kind of just how do you, I guess, is there any pressure with like people's expectations of like what these games are meant to be at this point?
Eric, you should take a swing. I've been talking too much.
I feel like I need to throw my cat out. Can I throw my cat out? Because she's driving me insane.
Absolutely. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, there's been a very special guest joining us in this section.
Well, give me 1 second.
A special guest with their rear end facing Eric's face.
So this is the butthole cut of Switchheads right now for sure.
Oh.
Hey, there we go.
Okay, absolutely. Eric, you go.
Apologies. That's actually a really, really good question, because we struggle a lot, I think, with being pigeonholed into the company that makes Myst likes. I mean, and we do it to ourselves too, because we do these new games, but I feel like we still gravitate towards the same themes and the same type of weird implementations of things. Like, we make weirdo games for weirdo gamers, and we kind of don't know how to do anything else. But it's a blessing and a curse, because we have this rabid, dedicated fan base that will kind of give us a shot on anything we're willing to bring to market. But at the same time, if it deviates too far from what we do, that some people don't like that.
Right.
So I feel like we're stuck in this space where we know we're never going to be able to please anybody. Everybody, I should say. We're never. So we're going to please some people.
That would be a problem.
That would be a problem. Just shut it down now. But like I'll use the Riven remake as an example, and everything I'm about to say is all public knowledge. But like, it's not exactly the same Riven. There are changes that we're making to revise the vision and improve on it and all that.
Good. Otherwise, why do it? Right. On some level. Right.
And it's not like the old one's going to go away. You can always go play OG Riven, but we know that no matter what we do, there's going to be people who say they don't like it for X, Y, and Z reason. Right.
Anything you change is possibly some person's favorite thing. Right. Like, or whatever. Right. Like, there's one, even if they're just one person and they're vocal. Yeah.
Yep. Or they're tied to like the way things were because they had to be done that way back in 97 or whatever, and we're going to bring it into the modern day and do things different. And that's going to be a negative for them. It's like, can't please everybody, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we're even having people upset about it is because we have so many people who give our stuff a shot and care about it. So try to not lose sight of that. But I don't know that I would necessarily consider us like the arbiters of adventure puzzle games or anything. There's so many people out there these days making such compelling, narrative adventure puzzle games that
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like we're not really the keepers of that anymore. Now we're just kind of one player in a big field, and
Mhm.
that's inspiring too, because it means we can go play other people's games and pick pieces from it that we want to see how we would do it our own way and that sort of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're on the money with some of that too, where it's like the point and click adventure. Myst likes. I saw someone recently call them liminal adventure games, which I think is a pretty great description of it. But like, I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily my genre at all. Like I like action games and roguelikes and platformers and all this kind of shit. I think the thing that has always driven, I like puzzles as well, right? But I think the thing that has always driven me to y'all's games, the newer games and the older games, is more that like sense of place and the sense of mystery. And I think especially recently, I just replayed Riven for the first time, I actually completed Riven for the first time recently. I started it a long time ago when I was a kid and actually played through it again. I was just like struck by the sense of like, I don't know. It's just like a feeling of the world, right? And I think that that's something that you guys do really, really well, is kind of that incorporation of, and this in Abduction as well. I thought this one of the best parts of Abduction was like the kind of integration of the story into the setting, into the puzzles and all that kind of stuff, right? And I don't think that has to, you could still get that vibe from any kind of game, right? It's just like got the Cyan touch that you guys bring to it. And I wonder like what kind of like other sorts of games you would like to work on that kind of brings that sense to it as well.
I feel like, well, just to go back to a certain point you made about the worlds being built to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what, Richard, who's the game director on the Riven remake and helped direct the original Riven, focuses on is the environmental storytelling and really making a world feel like it was lived in or is lived in. And maybe to your point, that may be something that other games miss too. You can make a great puzzle game, but does it feel like the world you're in is actually something that people have lived in? Or was it built for function? Was it built for aesthetic? What was it built for, I guess? Is it just a liminal space, or is it someone's room, I guess? So that's something that we love to focus on. With Abduction in particular, I'm talking about art and Abduction, where Eric definitely should be, but from my perspective, because he was the art director, I love that it was such a kludged together world, filled with people taken from many different places who've lived many different ways of life, and suddenly they're all stuck together in this weird world, and they have to learn how to live together, and you see glimpses of that in things that are in the environment. I don't really want to spoil it for people who haven't played Abduction, but I love that there's this sense of a place being lived in. So love that point. And to the point of games we could make that would enact the same thing. I mean, I'd love to make a horror game, because if you just take Myst and turn the lights down, or Riven turns the lights down, it's kind of spooky.
Like, dude, they're scary, man.
Yeah. You feel alone. You feel like you're being watched, there was this guy who was knocked out on the side of the cliff and now his body's not there. Like, that's eerie. That's Riven, by the way. But yeah. So I'd love to do that. Eric has different feelings on that, but that's what's great about us working together is we're a little bit of a yin and yang, and we like to push and pull, and we find a nice common ground, I guess. Go ahead.
I'm all about it. I think a Cyan style horror game. I'll say.
Yeah.
Would be a fun thing. We're exploring some ideas right now that kind of delve into a slightly darker territory, and there seems to be a desire for that in the marketplace.
Totally.
I can't see Cyan ever just doing like a full on gory game or anything like that.
It's creepy.
Yeah,
you're not doing like a Doom clone or anything.
Yeah, when I think of horror, I think of games like, I mean, there is a little bit of gore in it, but somewhere closer to like Soma or Amnesia, where the environmental storytelling is excellent there, and you feel very invested in the narrative they're trying to tell too. That's what I like, at least.
Yeah, or I can think of games like, I don't know if you guys saw or played Scorn, which was like a H.R. Giger inspired, call it a walking simulator puzzle game, but it's literally like a Myst style game set in this super crazy, over the top visual thing. And it's like, but they're the soul of the game is the same thing that we do. And so seeing that and recognizing it was kind of cool. I would love to step out of our box a little bit.
Would you love to step out of it gameplay wise too, or is that too?
Yeah. In fact, one of the thesis points of the talk that Hannah and I gave at Mysterium was about where do we go from here, and the idea of sort of reinvesting in our core IP, right? The idea of, call it the Dunnyverse for lack of a better term. Because I don't want to say the Myst universe, because that's too narrow.
That's like the Skywalker saga.
Exactly.
Of Star Wars, right?
That's the best parallel. Yeah. And so reinvesting in that, but doing it in a way that lets us, explore new territory gameplay wise, but still give the fan base what they're craving, which is more of that universe. And so that's kind of what we're exploring right now is that very idea, and see how far we can go, where it starts to feel like, can we as a team still make this type of game? Or is that, like, we're not going to go make I'm trying to think of like just a random off the wall game category that we have no experience whatsoever. Like I can't see us being like, you know what, we're going to go make a top down RTS turn-based, blah, 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 just because we have no
or like a car racing game.
Right. Yeah. Super
mini golf.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Super crunchy technical racing game. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is that kind of like a blessing or a curse to have such a deep lore to be able to play in? Because I think that's one of the, I read all the books and shit, and I love the Myst universe, and I think that's, again, one of the things that's so fascinating to me about the whole world is like how rich the whole thing is, right?
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. And Rand, the creator, one of the original creators of Myst, and he played Atris in the games, so people are probably familiar with him, even if they don't know that they are. He talks all the time about how it's a mixed blessing. In fact, Abduction, before it became Abduction, almost was another Myst game. It was a Myst sequel. And this was early on in the Kickstarter. We were planning it, and he came in one day and was like, "You guys, I don't think I can do a Myst game because it has too much baggage." Even little things like, linking books, which is the core sort of sci-fi mechanic of the Myst universe games, where you touch a book and you get teleported to another reality, essentially. There's rules about how that works, and these rules have been established through a whole series of games and a whole book series, and people get really pedantic about the rules, and it's difficult to even develop within that, because we have to track down, like, okay, is what we're doing kosher? Is this canon? Are we breaking fundamental rules? And it's literally like a whole committee to like check everything to make sure that we're not breaking anything. So that's not cool sometimes, when you just want to make a good game, but instead you have to your gut tells you to do something, but it goes counter to the lore or whatever. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I'm glad you guys did your own thing on Abduction, because it also was kind of, again, not spoiling anything, but kind of like the way that the puzzles work wouldn't have worked with that at all, and like the way that the kind of story reveals itself are like very much because Abduction is its own thing, and the kind of mechanics that you guys built in that universe were really interesting, right? So and Firmament is the same way. Like that's kind of its own full thing as well, which I also loved. Firmament. It's great stuff. It was really funny at Mysterium. They were like doing the speed run of Firmament, and all the people that hadn't played Firmament like left the room. And I was like,
oh my god!
And I was like, you guys really shouldn't have left the room. Like, you cannot tell what's going on. Like, it's all like clipping and out of bounds and all this crazy stuff. Like, it was very silly. But no, awesome job with that too. But yeah, I mean, I think there can be both, and I think that's awesome that you guys can do that. Maybe we can touch a little bit on like the difference maybe between, working on a brand new universe like in Abduction and Firmament versus going back and doing these remakes. I mean, you've been kind of ping-ponging back and forth. I guess it was like Abduction, Myst, Firmament, Riven, right? So
Mhm.
is there one that you kind of prefer to do, or like what are some things that you like about both approaches to making a new game?
What I appreciate about the Riven remake and the Myst remake really is that we can look at the context and we have something to already reference.
Right.
Yeah.
In creating it. And additionally, the person who maybe was in charge of the original vision, like Richard van der Wend, who's now in charge of the new vision, he's kind of like the singular vision holder for a project. And we can look to him and he knows exactly what it would be like to live in Riven. And he has all the answers. With newer IP, there are definitely like fewer checks and balances because there isn't this Bible that you necessarily have to go off of or reference or make sure everything's kosher. With that said, though, because it is fairly unrestricted, we have a lot more unrestricted design changes going in, so the vision isn't as cohesive initially. So it can be just tricky in that sense, getting a singular vision together for a new IP, even if it, arguably is more fun or better or whatever to work on. So,
Yeah.
Eric, what about you?
I feel like the remakes, right? So Myst and using Myst and Riven as an example, those feel way easier just because those big questions are already answered. Like, we know that we have a fun game because it wouldn't have been as popular as it was if it wasn't successful on some level. So we can kind of stick to the blueprint when there's a question. When we're out in the wilderness on a new project, Abduction or Firmament, there's just like, you can go anywhere. You can make any rule you want. And to Hannah's point, especially early on, it can be difficult to figure out what the silhouette is of that project, what the scope is, what the bounds are. And Abduction and Firmament both grew and shrank significantly over the lifespan of those projects because it's one thing to have a cool idea early on, but then 2 years down the line, when you realize that cool idea is going to be nearly impossible to pull off at the scale you need to, right? Because of all the other factors that have changed in the interim, makes for some really tough conversations and some really hard meetings, right? Where you're like, pick which limb you want to cut off because we're cutting, that sucks. But at the same time, when you say, what's more fun, my answer tends to be very much informed by whatever we just finished doing.
Right.
And, earlier this year we finished Firmament. That was a difficult lift for the studio, and it had been for a long time, but we got it out the door. And so, every bone in my body is like, I'm ready for a Myst game. I'm ready for I did it too. I said Myst game. I meant like a Dunnyverse game, right? Something that something that hews back towards that, and seeing how fired up people get about the prospect of that is a huge motivator. So I tend to flee whatever the previous project was and want to go do the opposite of whatever that is. So
that makes, and you got, again, that's like a privilege to be able to do that at all, right? Like, I mean, I'm the same way. It's like I like to be creative and I like to do random shit, but it's like having like some guidelines and like having restrictions within which to play can almost make you more creative in a way too,
100%. When we're working on new ideas, we always talk about the box that you want to work within, and finding what the edges of that box are as early as possible is like the most empowering thing ever. Not knowing where the edges of that box is terrifying. That's the worst part about the development. And, you learn as you go. And so we learned a lot of lessons from Firmament, and we're trying to put them into practice now. So,
how many limbs you're going to ship with already.
Right.
No cutting necessary. Yeah. You said Firmament was a bit of a difficult production. Was some of that just like working from home and COVID and stuff like that, or?
Oddly, the working from home, I felt I'd love Hannah's thoughts here too, but I feel like we actually kind of aced that one as a team. No, let me answer the first part, and then I'd love to talk briefly about our stint, switching to work from home. No, it was just a big project. It was a big project, and it was a Kickstarter project, which adds an entire extra layer of expectation and interaction and like goals we have to hit
Sure.
It makes it a much harder target. It was just a big project, and I think we didn't do a really good job defining the walls of that box early enough, and we had to do it sort of late stage. And I don't think it was the right path to go down. That said, we made it through, right? Our superpower as a studio is sort of being able to get products to market, even despite some of the hard decisions we have to make along the way. And so I don't know that we could have done anything differently given the circumstances. It was also the first project where Hannah and I, were sort of coming in as leadership and getting, well, that's not first original project. Hannah's making a face.
We did that on Myst.
Yeah, I'm talking like first big original game.
Yeah. Non-remake.
Yeah. And I'll be the first person to say like, oh yeah, mistakes were made on steering us through that process, and I'm happy to own those, and that's why I say it's like learning from those mistakes and trying to do better next time. But everybody on the team worked their butt off on this project. Everybody was grinding for a long time, and it was just a hard lift. It was a hard one.
Totally.
That said, I'm still proud of what we made. Like
it's a gorgeous game, and it hit all those notes that I was looking for.
That's awesome.
With a Cyan game, right? So yeah, it was definitely a huge fan over here.
As far as the working from home thing, though, like Hannah and I, when we stepped into the studio, we had already been working from home at our previous jobs when they asked us to come back and kind of step up to the leadership roles. And so we were already like, we got to get this studio more nimble when it comes to flexibility of where people work and all that. And so we were already kind of going down that road. And then 2020 happened, and it got real quick. Hannah, what would you say if, like, in terms of lessons learned during that period?
Yeah, that was cray. I think the best lesson I learned was be proactive, I guess, in planning for the worst, because I think 2 months, 3 months before everyone had to work from home, me and our principal engineer, Carl Johnson, we were already investigating methods to be able to work from home. And I want to say Myst's ship date probably would have slipped by at least a month or two if we hadn't had figured that out before we all were forced to go home. So being proactive in planning for the worst case scenario, I guess, is probably a good lesson learned. Just in case there's another global pandemic or something. And
more likely than you think.
I guess now, I was just watching a show yesterday where they featured people going to a Sephora or something like that and getting makeup put on them by the people who worked at the store. And I was thinking like, oh, I can't even imagine sharing makeup with someone else at a store now. Like, how many people have touched that? So crazy.
Or like putting on like a VR headset from somebody else.
At
a convention.
Blowing out birthday candles is the thing.
Blowing out birthday candles.
Done with that.
Putting on a VR headset. Sometimes at PAX shows, me and our producer Ryan Warzeka, we would like clean the headsets as best as we could, and there would still be sweat embedded in the foam, even with a protector on.
I have a no public VR demo policy. I will not do it. I just can't do it.
Yeah. Anyway, all of that said, another lesson learned was just like making sure you build a team who are just able to function independently is the best I can put it. Some people say companies fail when they go remote. I think that they just haven't built the right team for remote work, really, because teams are definitely capable of it. You just need the kind of person who would be good to work from home with. Yeah. And that's something you can sort of suss out in an interview process or whatever. But thankfully our already existing team, because we barely hire, we hire like 2 people a year or something, was already great at doing that sort of thing. So, I feel like that's all I really have to say. It went much more smoothly than I think I would have imagined it going. Yeah. So it's honestly great that we were able to ship a game that same year that we all
Myst was done. Myst was done pretty much entirely remote. The bulk of it was.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I work in animation, and we had to do the the shift too. I imagine it's pretty similar to game dev, where it's you know, you don't have to be in a physical space, and it was like oh shit, we actually did this. You know, we put out like 2 or 3 shows, like all working from home. Like
if
most
anything,
of our
we were
studio
just,
still
like,
does. Yeah,
we were all combating like incredible loneliness during the whole time.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much are people going to get their work done thing. It was like, is everyone emotionally and mentally okay? Some days we were not.
Yeah, I still ask myself that question.
Can confirm.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I mean, I didn't mean to segue into this with the last thing, but maybe we can talk a little bit about VR. I mean, I feel like all of the games that you guys have worked on, like in the past 4 Cyan games, have all been kind of not necessarily like they are VR games, but they're, you know, you could argue that the best way to play them is in VR, right? And I think, you know, the Myst likes and these kind of first person puzzle games, I think, lend themselves obviously to a VR format really well. But, you know, I mean, VR is, you know, still in so many ways a niche platform. You know, I think that it, you know, we were talking about Apple before we started recording. You know, they're obviously trying to get a dog in that race, and that might be something that sets it up. You know, I keep saying that I think the way that to get VR into everyone's house is for Nintendo to finally jump in and, like, you know, have a little headset you could slide the Switch into, and then, you know, that's
you're
really
just saying
low
that
cost.
Because you guys are big Nintendo guys. That's just wishful thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think it's like, you know, it's like I'm just curious, like, as one of the studios that's out there making arguably like the most complete like VR games for VR, you know, so many VR games are like little experiences even still, right? Like what's your guys' thought on VR as a platform? What do you think the future is? And are there challenges between, you know, developing something with VR in mind and then something that's meant to be played like 2D?
Oh man, you said so many things that are like loaded statements. There's so much to like break down and parse there.
Let's go. I like to lead questions.
Okay, I have opinions on.
Please.
Are our games best played in VR? I feel like it depends on the person very much. Some people just can't, with the way VR currently functions, they just can't play in VR, and obviously that would be a bad experience for them if they tried to force themselves into it. Additionally, I think each platform has its strengths and weaknesses, and I think it just depends on what you want, generally speaking. So to segue into what you said about like our games offering maybe the most complete experiences in VR, I feel like it depends on what you mean by complete too, because there are games like Beat Saber or Supernatural that some people might not even call them games, they're experiences or whatever, that take advantage of like full body movement to some extent.
Right.
And some people would argue that's the complete experience that they're looking for in VR. And we certainly try to in Myst, you know, pulling that lever, opening that door.
Sure. Yeah,
you go, girl, you stretch that arm, you know, like
I think what I meant by that was more like, as far as, because I think when people think of VR, and again, you're totally right. I'm putting a lot of myself into this and what I kind of think about it. But it's like, for me, VR is like so synonymous with that immersion, right? And like immersing yourself into a world and like going to a different place. And that's what I feel like y'all do perfectly, you know?
Yeah. I just wanted to break it down just
Absolutely.
so that
that's fair. Yeah.
Eric and I aren't coming off saying, yes, we offer the most complete full
Go for it. Fuck
experiences.
it.
I'm glad you noticed. I'm glad you noticed.
With that said, yeah, I think Cyan is definitely one of the leaders in offering your definition of like a full experience, like hours of unique gameplay. It's not the same repeatable room with like different procedural circumstances or whatever. Like, you have a full story that you can actually play in like an enormous environment to explore. I think Cyan's one of the only companies doing that. I know there are a few others. But, this is all about Cyan, so we'll just keep doing the Cyan. I love that. It's also very hard to do that. Extremely hard. And that's probably why there aren't so many other companies doing that, because we're solving major technical hurdles doing that.
Yeah.
It's already hard to make a very expansive environment in a 2D environment. Lots of games just have hallways or small rooms, and we've decided, Eric's decided to have this enormous vista, and he will not compromise on it. So we have major technical hurdles that we're solving every single day because of that, and not every team can do that. And sometimes we struggle to accomplish those too.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we're struggling every day to accomplish that sort of thing. So, something, it's hard. That's the main point I'm trying to make. We love it, but it's hard. So, Eric, do you have anything you want to say about that?
when we did Abduction, which was the first big VR effort we put forth, we had the benefit of not knowing how hard it was going to be to do that parity between the two.
Yeah.
But at the time, to your point about like, oh, you make like big games that in VR, I think Abduction may have been one of the first like full games that wasn't just a little VR experience, or within the first like 6 months of games coming out. Like I'm not making that claim because I actually think that
you could say like the Gallery. Call of the Starseed, like other games like that.
Cloudhead was right out in front. There were a handful of others right out in front. And I also think others did it better because they made it VR only. And that's the thing that people don't consider from a development standpoint is that when you make a game that is both 2D and VR, it's not the best of both worlds. It's the opposite. It's the worst of both worlds. You have to limit your VR interactions so that you don't break the 2D, the flat screen experience, and you have to, oddly enough, limit the 2D experience so that you don't break the VR one, and they both have to be limited. And it's a good example is like interaction regions, right?
Sure.
In a 2D game, I'll use when we did Myst, the channelwood valves were at foot level in the original game, but you can't guarantee that a VR player is going to be able to reach their feet or isn't already sitting. So if they reach down, they'd have to reach 3 feet below the floor to reach. Right. So what do we need to do? We need to constrain interactions within a region, like around a person's torso, so that a seated VR player can reach all the same levers and buttons that a 2D player can.
Yeah, like Catherine's letter on the first island is on like a pedestal or something.
It's on a rock.
So it's on a rock. Yeah.
For exactly that reason. Yep.
Right.
And so those limitations, that's a huge limitation design wise, and we all hate it, right? Even Randall sometimes be like, "Oh, we'll do the thing and we'll put the thing here," and we'll be like, "Well, we can't because this reason." He's like, "Oh, dang it. Can we do it anyway?" And we're like, "No, you can't. There's rules for a reason."
Yeah, and you don't want to just make like 2 full games, like a VR game, and you want to be able to like meld them if you can, right?
Yeah,
so.
and we've built our entire tool set to be able to build it once, so to speak, and then go to various platforms. And I'll use Myst again as an example. That game we shipped on high-end PC consoles and also on Oculus Quest, which hardware-wise is like cats and dogs. It's a totally different platform in terms of rendering pipeline and GPU and CPU and all that.
At its core, a Quest 1 at this point is like an 8-year-old Android phone, which is wild.
Yeah.
So getting the game to run in stereo on a cell phone, an 8-year-old cell phone, and also on a high-end gaming console, that's a challenge. And so it's been tough. We love it. We wouldn't do it if we didn't love VR. That said, I can't say that every single game we ever make is going to be VR. We're trying to keep our options open, and we're trying to pick our battles and be smart. So we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, I got to imagine it's got like some advantages to like having, with it not being like a huge pool of gamers, like the percentage of gamers that are bought into the VR infrastructure, and not like as many developers making for VR. That's got to have a bit of a built-in audience when you do put out a game, and it's like a fully featured game, like we're talking about, not an experience. It's got to be a lot of hunger for that for people that have these platforms, right? So I can see that like being really nice.
I've been keeping an eye on recent releases on the Quest store.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see from some reviews people saying that they're craving content like ours in response to some of the content that's been put out lately. Not necessarily that makes that content bad. It's just not like there's an audience out there that still wants what we try to make, which is interesting and cool to see, I think.
Yeah, I'm not personally like bought into I have like an original Quest, right? And I haven't used it as much as I thought I would, which, a lot of people I know do, which is great. But I think my way I like to play y'all's games now, since I've gotten it, is the Steam Deck, because that to me is kind of the best of both worlds. And I found this as well when I just played Myst 3, because it has the 360 like panoramic thing. I'm like a slut for gyro controls. So it's like having, the being able to like look around the environment kind of gives me that feel like I am in VR in a way, but like in a much more like comfortable environment for me, and something where I can still use traditional controls, which I'm very used to, and all that kind of stuff. Right. So I love that you like still like, I love a device like that, because I'm able to kind of get the vibe of what you guys are going for in VR with something else. And, anyway, I just love the Steam Deck. I don't know why I'm gushing on it all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, there's something to say about accessibility for sure. Being able to pick something up and just instantly start playing the game you want to play. It's hard to do that on computer. You got to boot it up, or if it was even on already, you got to open up Steam. Like there's probably an update. It always grabs an update every time you open it. It's like the whole thing. And then I can't imagine trying to explain doing that to my grandma. Like I'd much rather give her a Steam Deck and just say, press the power button and then press the A button on MS3.
Even the old games, it's got the trackpad. It's like, it was like playing through like Riven and the original Myst and all that stuff on Steam Deck was like an absolute delight. So I love that.
Yeah. When we first got the dev kits, I opened up Myst Masterpiece Edition and Riven, and was surprised to see that they just worked, especially with the trackpad. Like that was really cool to see.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I've been recommending, after having completed Riven, I was kind of like gobsmacked by Riven, to be honest. Like finally beating it, I was like, man, I'm like so fucking pumped for the remake, guys. Like you have no idea.
Awesome.
Like,
awesome.
Yeah. Because I'm recommending a lot of people like they're like, should I just wait for the remake or should I and I was like, I don't know, man. I think you should play the original and then play the remake. It like holds up remarkably well. And I think that like, and it's especially if you guys are talking about adding stuff to it, changing stuff from it. I think that'll be a fascinating way to do it. And I was very, very surprised how well that game holds up. Just the 1997 game. I was like, man, I guess it's actually like tomorrow is like the
that's correct.
25th anniversary of it, right? Am I wrong on that? That's congratulations.
Close. I think it will have been
24.
20. Wait, if it was 1997, then it's the 26th anniversary, right?
Well, either way, it's a long ass time.
It is a long time. Myst just celebrated 30 years last month. Riven's not too far behind.
I was telling David before we recorded that I played Riven on a PlayStation 1, and it had that big fat like jewel case. Like it was like all my other PlayStation games and then Riven,
That's awesome.
The Titanic of PS1 games. Maybe we can talk a little bit just about Riven and kind of like what, obviously you guys did a talk about it at Mysterium, and it's a very beloved game, maybe not quite as known as Myst these days. Myst is like the iconic game that's been remade, like 8 times, right? This is the first time that this game has been remade. There's a lot of pressure, especially after the new Myst remake came out and was really well received. Can you just like kind of tell us some things that you're excited about with this game? Maybe some things that people should expect. And then if people have never played it before, like what's kind of like your pitch on the game? Like why should they be looking forward to this remake?
I think what's struck me as we've started putting it together and being able to play through the whole thing and all that is it just as something as simple as having the ability to look wherever you want. Absolutely fundamentally changes the experience because in the original Riven, you know, you knew where you were, but you didn't have quite the same spatial sense that you do in a modern game. And being able to look around and see different perspectives that you could never see in the original has been, it just makes the space feel even more intimate and makes it feel more accessible. You feel like you're there in this weird little place. And also Riven, you know, my memory of playing the original was that it was this giant, huge experience. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with the 5 discs and the, you know, maglev rides all over the place. But the new version feels cozy in a, not in a bad way, but in like a really like, this is a little jewel box of a game. Right. And being able to go in there and make it look beautiful has been just such a treat. I'm excited for people who played the original to see the new version and sort of feel like they're going home, you know, getting that going back to Riven feeling, because we've felt it in the studio and I can't wait for the players to feel that too, because people feel this profound sense of connection to that game in particular. Yeah. We recently had a journalist out to the studio to check out the state of things, and his comment after playing a little bit of the game was basically like, you guys, I can't wait to play this on my own because I just want to re-experience this world and experience the new stuff for the first time. It's like, I feel like I have an opportunity to play Riven again for the first time. And that feels like such a treat. So
I'm excited for the workroom personally. It's going to be crazy. Yeah.
Go Hannah. What do you got?
You know, I was going to say the same thing.
I'm sorry.
No. I loved that he said, I can't wait to re-experience Riven for the first time. Because he got a taste of that. Playing some new puzzles, seeing some new areas. It was, I can't wait for people to experience that. And what I love about it too is that people will always have the original to go back and play, and for whatever reason, cross-referencing, you know, checking that we're sticking to canon.
Making comparison videos. Yeah,
Making comparison videos. But I love that we're a company that will let people play both and see both for what they are, and they're both acceptable and great and loved. So I love that I love the way that Richard and Rand are pitching this new one. It's very meta. It's very like, we've gone back to the cavern, or, you know, we went through the archaeological dig and found more information about.
I was really struck by that. I was like, wait, does Rand really believe? I was like confused. But I think it's such a charming way to do it. Like, talk about it as if it's real. Like, I don't know. It's cool.
Exactly. And it makes sense too, because like Rand said, you can't consider a lot of these things dogmatic and just consider them written in stone. People's feelings and opinions and sometimes facts or whatever may change over time, depending on what has happened. And, you know, Rand and Richard have lived quite the life, separately, of course. That sounds like they're like one human being, which is
they're
like
married.
Weird.
Yes.
They're married, you know, happily married. And I think especially for Richard too, his ability to reflect on Riven after 26 years now, he has a lot more to say about it than he used to, I think. And being able to give him that voice and charge has been very special. And I can't wait for people to see more of his vision come through.
Yeah, I'm so glad you guys were able to get him back, that he was interested in doing this again, right? Because it's like, Riven is such an incredible sequel. I think it's got to be one of the best sequels to a video game ever made, and just that it really shakes up the whole formula so much while being like a direct story, like this happens the day after Myst, like kind of sequel, right? And so I think getting that secret sauce back, right? And then and just the whole feeling of like isolation, and they're people that are on the island this time, and they're there. They just don't want to fucking talk to you, you know?
Right.
Like, you know, like that's such a unique vibe. So I'm really excited to experience that again.
Something, just this is a very small thing, but something that I loved about the Myst remake and am going to love about the Riven remake is that the Myst previously had not been playable with subtitles on in many different languages. You kind of had to know English in order to play Myst. And now with Riven, we're localizing it. I feel like that should be given, but we're localizing it for the same and maybe even more languages than the Myst remake had. And that's going to be like a whole group, tons of people who will be able to experience Riven for the first time ever if they don't know the English language. Yeah. So I'm stoked for that. They're probably not listening to this podcast if they don't know.
No,
English,
we're going to localize this podcast.
Yeah. I'm stoked. We won't be able to afford actually like recording different audio for every single language, but subtitles at the very least. Like I love that it will be playable, and you know, text and journals will be localized, all of the things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just everything that we're doing to make our games more accessible is really important. And this goes back to the VR thing too, with Myst in particular. You know, we brought it to Quest, which was like one of the most accessible VR platforms in the market at that time. So we're always looking for ways to make things more accessible, and that means languages for Riven. It could mean more options for people who are hard of hearing. It could be a ton of other stuff. So I'm looking forward to letting Riven be played by more people.
Awesome. I can't wait to play Riven on the VR mode in Switch 2. That's going to be really, really great.
Well, we haven't talked about Riven coming to VR yet, but
is that true?
That has not been announced.
That has not been announced.
I guess I just assumed.
I guess I just assumed. You can hope and dream, and maybe one day it'll come true, but we have nothing to say about that at this time.
Nintendo hasn't announced a Super Switch either, so we'll have to see. But anyway, thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This has been super awesome talking to you guys. I'm such a huge fan of the franchise and of these kinds of games in general. I've as I get older as well, I'm like really like falling into these kinds of games, walking simulators and Outer Wilds and like, all these kinds of games that I feel, they're incredible. And I think all these kinds of games that I think owe themselves a lot to, to the history of Cyan and what has been around for a long time. And I think to the stuff that you guys are making now. I really do, whether or not you guys feel like you're the arbiters of this genre, like it really feels like, you guys are really kind of bearing the torch in a lot of ways. And I just really appreciate, whatever kinds of games you make in the future, that you guys are still making these sorts of games and that there's a place for them in the current landscape.
Thanks, David. And to the point that Eric made before too, like, something that both Eric and I love is that it's almost hard to see ourselves as the arbiters of it because so many other people have sometimes arguably done it better nowadays. And we love that because that means I have more games to play.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, once again, thank you so much, Hannah and Eric. And with that, we're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. This week, I guess I wanted to talk about two games in particular. The first of them is Sonic Superstars. Been playing a lot more of that. I've been playing some Mario Wonder 2, but because of, if you listened last week, I'm playing it kind of slowly. So, but my kid and I have played a lot more of Sonic Superstars, and I feel like I was maybe a little unfair last week as I've played more of it. We had a glitch when we first fired it up where I couldn't join as a second player. I mean, I have had other weird glitches in this game, so like it isn't as polished as it maybe should be. But since then, we've had more luck joining at the start where you can pick your character. But if you jump in the middle of a game, you get randomly a character. So that's kind of weird. But we've gotten through the first 10 or so zones in the game, so I imagine we're getting probably close to the end. There are the good thing is I feel like we've gotten better at playing together. It's definitely still not perfect. Like, in terms of like, because you're so speedy, but I think I just gotten used to that and playing together. Tails is a beast. I mean, Tails is a beast in all the games, but I feel like Tails really is easy mode. In like so many ways in this game, you can just skip so much and beat every boss with just Tails. Like, and it's nice. There are like some stages that are unique to each character. Like there's a Knuckles stage and an Amy stage where it's really designed for their skills. And I kind of wish there was more of those, but it's cool that there are some of them at all. I don't know. I've just been having a lot more fun with it recently. So, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I haven't picked it back up since the little that I played, so I'm looking forward to jumping back in myself. I'm glad to hear you're liking it more than you were before.
Yeah, I think, I was a little harsh on it, especially compared to Mario Wonder. But as I played it more, it's enjoyable. It's a solid Sonic game. It could be better. Yeah. It could be worse.
Better than Sonic 4.
Yeah. So then the other big thing I've been playing was a lot of Splatoon this weekend with the Splatfest. I played with some Switch heads and with my kid. I think it was just, this happens a lot now with Splatoon, which is like, he doesn't want to play it at first. And then I'm playing, he's like, maybe I'll do one with you. And then we get into it, which is nice. He's like, I'm kind of over Splatoon. And I'm like, okay, but I'm going to play it. And then he gets into it. And so that's been fun. And then I just have to give a shout out. I played with several people, but ABK and I had a really stellar tricolor run. I'm a big tricolor fan. And I think this was maybe the best non-bespoke. I think the Zelda tricolor stage might have been the best one, but this was this best like regular stage converted into a tricolor stage because the advantage wasn't as clear. I actually think attacking teams had an advantage this time, whereas usually defending team feels like it has an advantage. And so it felt like a little bit of a mix up in that way, but it wasn't like outrageous because ABK and I won defending. We won like every which way, like in a short amount of time, which was a lot of fun, where like the other team got all the signals and we still won. We got all the signals and we won. Like we defended and we won. And I was like, I think we have to call it there because we just like, we won every way.
yeah.
It's like,
swept up.
Yeah. Anyway, I had a lot of fun playing Splatoon and I played a little bit of Wonder, but I haven't like gotten any new things to say there, I think yet. So what about you, David? What have you been playing?
I played a little bit of Splatoon, just a smattering, during the Splatfest, not as much as I wanted to, but, since we recorded last time, I have 100%ed Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
Wow.
I went all the way through that sumbitch and, beat it. And, it's an excellent game. Got some really challenging levels there at the end. And, I loved it, man. I think, it was definitely a great experience for me. I do think it's better than the new Super Mario Brothers games, and that's from somebody who really, really loves the new Super Mario Brothers games.
Yeah.
And so, excellent stuff. I'm looking forward to playing it again. I'm even interested now in kind of learning the speed route a little bit.
Nice.
And because I've been watching a lot of speed runs, man, and I've been kind of learning the route and kind of like figuring out some stuff. And I think learning some of the tech seems like this is a very approachable speed run game. So if you got an hour and 40 minutes to waste on a 80% run and 2 Switch controllers, I guess. But yeah, other than that, I poked around a little bit before doing our episode with Hannah and Eric today. I've been playing some older Myst games. You guys know I played Riven and Myst 3. I also popped back open just the original Myst Masterpiece Edition on my Steam Deck. Super fun to poke around that game. It's just crazy how well those games like hold up, compared to other games from that era. I think it's like the simplicity of the controls and the input and the simplicity of the presentation make those games age like a fine wine, as opposed to something that has weird control inputs in order to make things more complicated that are completely outdated by today's standards. Like going back to a game like that, it's almost like, it's just wild, like how well it works, especially like we talked about in the interview, like on something like a Steam Deck where you've got it portably now and it's this pick up and play kind of attitude of it. I really do implore a lot of, I think a lot of people in the Switch Heads community, I don't think I've really played the Myst games. And I think like I would really implore people check out the at the very least the remake of Myst, and then and Riven are just hold up remarkably well, and they're all really cheap on Steam and worth playing. So I would recommend those.
I feel inspired. I haven't played a Myst or Riven since I was like 17 or whatever. Like, so it's been a good long while. I'm kind of interested to try it. I've kind of lived vicariously watching your streams, but I kind of want to click around myself now too.
I say pick up Myst, and like and my recommendation is just read everything. You know what I mean? I think like have a little app on your phone so you can take some notes if you need to, but go into the library on Myst Island and just read the books in there, or pick one book and then in there, and then use that to figure out the puzzles for that world, and just actually like read the journals and stuff, right? And I think a lot of people just try to like go straight through it and figure it out from the environment.
Got stuck as a kid, I think, because you're just like trying to gun it, and you can't, because you just come up against obtuse puzzles, and then you're like.
But the journals are all really well written, and it's actually pretty captivating, and so it's like it's definitely just be a little patient. And then you'll find, especially now that you're older a little bit, it's like this stuff is, if you just use your brain, it's really easy to get through a lot of this stuff. Yeah. But anyway, lastly, I'll talk about really randomly, I picked up the original Alan Wake. Alan Wake 2 just came out this past week, and it looks fantastic. It's getting really excellent reviews. And I realized that I've had the original Alan Wake in my Steam library for about a decade, and I've never really played it. And so it's spooky season, and I thought I'd put on a kind of spooky psychological thriller game, and I'm having a fun time with it. I think it's definitely showing its age a little bit. This is not the remaster that I'm playing; it's the original game. But the remaster really was just kind of a graphical upgrade. I think they kind of kept all the mechanics of the original game in there, but I mean, it's a great game. I definitely see what all the fuss is about. I think, it hasn't aged particularly well in that, like, I think the main character is like really unlikable, and and like I'm not a huge like shooty guy, and there's definitely like some shooting in this game. I think it's definitely less than a lot of games from the era. But I mean, there's stuff in it too where it's like there's like random collectible stuff. There's like coffee thermoses randomly in random places that have no reason to be there. It's like, this feels like a 13-year-old game here. We've come up with better ways in order to better integrate collectibles into the world that fit the narrative, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely recommend it. And from everything I've heard about Alan Wake 2, which I am very interested in playing, kind of playing through the first game is definitely a good idea. And I think it's on Steam sale right now for like $3. So it's definitely worth picking that up. But I'm really enjoying my time with Alan Wake. And that's what I've been playing this week.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for our episode on Cyan and our interview with them. Thanks again to Hannah and Eric for joining us. And then thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website, and thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick, online, you can find me most places as PDYX.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And if you'd like to find our show online, we are at Switchheads on Twitter, at Super Switchheads on Instagram and Facebook. We got a website, switchheads.com, and then we've got a Facebook group and a Discord. Both of those links will be in the description of the show. Wherever you listen to this, on Spotify, Apple, or watching it on YouTube, we'll have the links there. Please join us at the Discord. We'd love to have you. It's such a wonderful community. And we'd just love to see you there. I love the Discord so much. I don't know what I'd do without the Discord. I would pass away. That's not true. Maybe. I don't know. Who knows? I haven't tried it. But anyway, that does it for our episode on Cyan and our talk with Hannah and Eric. I guess we should give them a shout out. You can find Cyan on Twitter as well. You can find them at Cyan Worlds, and you can find Eric and Hannah as well through there. You'll find links to their profiles on that as well. So shoot them a follow. Play more Cyan games. Play more Myst games. But you guys know the drill. With that, that's going to do it. We got another great episode for you next week. We got a wonderful new Nintendo release coming out this weekend with WarioWare Move It. So I'm excited to talk about that next week. But in the meantime, gang, you know the drill. We love you. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Play Riven. God damn it. Play Riven right now. That game is top 5 games of all time. Love you very much. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.